The trial lasted 3 weeks. My husband sat in the courtroom in an expensive suit, and his lawyer whispered advice in his ear. The jury listened to my story, my real story, and after 6 hours, they came back. Guilty. On all counts. Bigamy, fraud, theft, 7 years in federal prison, and the loss of everything. He lost his freedom. He lost his money. He lost everything because he could not stop his lies. Welcome to the She Defied Age channel. Before we continue, please let us know in the comments section which region you are connecting from. We genuinely value this information. We wish you a deeply engaging experience with this remarkable narrative that is about to unfold. I was 71 years old when I discovered that the foundation of my entire adult life had been constructed from deliberate falsehoods. What I uncovered was not simply infidelity or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was a systematic deception that had persisted for nearly 3 decades, woven so carefully into the fabric of everyday existence that no one around me, not even those closest to me, had detected the elaborate architecture of lies. The man I had pledged my future to had been living a parallel existence all along, maintaining 2 separate households, 2 separate identities, 2 separate claims to commitment and love. And the moment I decided to trust my instincts instead of dismissing them as the paranoia of an aging woman, everything changed. The private investigator sat across from me in my kitchen in North Carolina, the afternoon light filtering through the windows and casting long shadows across the table between us. His expression was grave, almost apologetic, as if he wished the contents of the folder he was about to show me did not exist. He slid the manila envelope toward me slowly, deliberately, and when I opened it with trembling fingers, I found documents that would alter the trajectory of my remaining years in ways I could never have anticipated. Inside was a marriage certificate, dated decades before I had ever met my husband, bearing his signature alongside a name that was not mine. The investigator looked directly at me, and his next words hung in the air with the weight of an executioner's pronouncement. "Mom, what you've just discovered means you're about to become significantly more affluent. Because this revelation is far more than a betrayal of trust. This is bigamy. And under the laws of this state, everything he accumulated through deception, everything we constructed together as a couple, and everything he was keeping hidden with someone else now legally belongs to you." My name is Eleanor Davies, and I'm here to share with you how one moment of paying attention to my own intuition saved me from spending the final chapter of my life existing within an illusion. But before I proceed further with this account, I want to establish a genuine connection with you. If you're rehearing this story, I need you to know that your experience matters, and I need you to respond. I need you to tell me where you are right now. What region do you call home? What part of the world is listening to my words? Because the events that unfolded in my life could happen to anyone anywhere across any country. And I need you to understand that having doubts, that questioning inconsistencies, that listening to your inner voice is not a sign of weakness or paranoia. It is wisdom. It is self-preservation. Let me transport you back to where this journey began, to the moment when everything started to feel wrong. The calendar showed March of the following year. The mountains surrounding my home were beginning to transition from their winter dormancy into spring awakening, and I was seated in my sunlit room with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands when a realization struck me with sudden clarity. I realized I could not recall the last occasion when my husband David had looked me directly in the eye and told me he loved me. 70 years of living teaches you to recognize patterns. It teaches you that when a man who consistently arrived home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon suddenly began having client entertainments scheduled 3 or 4 nights each week, something is fundamentally wrong. When a man who never previously showed interest in his telephone suddenly positions it beneath his pillow before sleep, something is fundamentally wrong. When a man who had been entirely predictable for nearly 3 decades suddenly develops an air of mystery and concealment, something is very, very wrong. My son Michael thought I was allowing anxiety to override my reason. "Mom," he said during one of our telephone conversations, "Dad is simply dealing with anxiety about his upcoming retirement. You reapproaching 70 yourself. Perhaps you just creating problems where none exist." But here is what 7 decades of life experience teaches a woman. The label of paranoia is often applied to female perception unfairly. What people dismiss as paranoia is actually clarity. It is the ability to recognize when patterns have shifted. It is intuition refined through years of observation. David was a specialist in commercial real estate transactions. He possessed the kind of charisma and persuasive ability that had enabled him to build a substantial career. We inhabited a gracious residence nestled in the foothills. We traveled internationally twice yearly, and to anyone observing from outside, we appeared to be the embodiment of a contented couple approaching their golden years together. Yet something was creating friction in my consciousness, something that accumulated like sediment over time. I noticed the way he would minimize his laptop screen whenever I entered his workspace. I observed how the weekend inspections of development sites seemed to extend further and further into evening hours. I saw that our shared bank account reflected regular transfers and withdrawals that I could not immediately account for. I am not a woman whose nature inclines toward suspicion, but neither am I foolish. So one morning in late March, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I decided to look up the contact information for a licensed investigator. I found a number for someone named Richard Harmon, whose office was located in a modest building adjacent to a financial services firm downtown. The space was not ostentatious or theatrical, simply functional. The frosted glass door bore his name in straightforward lettering. I must have stood in that hallway for several minutes, gathering my resolve before I finally knocked. A voice called out permission to enter. Richard Harmon did not match my preconceived notion of what an investigator should be. He appeared to be in his mid-50s, with graying hair at his temples and a reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. His button-down shirt bore the wrinkles of genuine wear. He resembled someone who could be my neighbor or my accountant, someone ordinary and trustworthy. That ordinariness provided me with comfort. "Mrs. Davies," he said, rising from his desk and extending his hand in greeting. "Please have a seat. May I offer you something to drink? A glass of water, perhaps?" "No, thank you," I replied, my voice steadier than my internal state. "I'm not entirely certain I should be here." "That is what most people think when they first arrive," he said gently, resuming his seat. "Why do not you tell me what prompted you to visit today?" So I began to speak. I described the distance that had grown between us, the phone calls he took in hushed tones, the way he had become a stranger in his own home. I described the financial irregularities I had noticed, and most importantly, I described the growing sense of wrongness that had been expanding in my stomach for months. Richard listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad as I spoke. He asked me fundamental questions about the length of our marriage, about whether we had children together, about my husband's profession and the scope of his business interests. I explained that we had been together for 27 years, that I had a son from my first marriage who was now in his 40s, that my husband had maintained limited contact with his own adult children from previous relationships. Richard absorbed this information methodically, his expression remaining neutral and attentive. When I finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully over his glasses. "Mrs. Davies, I want to be direct with you about something," he said. "In my experience, when individuals come through that door expressing the concerns you've articulated, their internal instincts are validated by what we ultimately discover approximately 70% of the time. The real question I need to ask you is this: are you emotionally prepared for what we might uncover?" My hands had begun to perspire. I pressed them together in my lap to still their trembling. "I need the truth," I told him. "Even if that truth brings pain, I need to know it. I am 70 years old, Mr. Harmon. I do not have the luxury of time to waste on comfortable deceptions." Something in his expression shifted then, a softening, a recognition perhaps of my sincerity. "All right," he said. "Here is how I operate. I conduct surveillance that is entirely lawful. I perform background investigations. I access financial records through proper channels. Everything I do is legal and defensible in court if necessary. My fee is $3,500. That sum covers approximately 30 to 40 hours of investigative work. Should the investigation require additional time beyond that scope, we will discuss supplementary fees. I will maintain regular communication with you, updating you on my findings. All discoveries will be documented thoroughly with photographic evidence, precise timestamps, and all the materials you would require if this matter proceeds to legal proceedings. Is this arrangement acceptable to you? $3,500. I thought about the decades of my life that I had invested in this marriage, the trust one had given, the dreams I had built. $3,500 seemed a small price for clarity. When can you begin your investigation? I asked him. I can commence tomorrow, he replied. But Eleanor, before you commit to this path, I want you to consider this carefully. Once we open this particular door, there is no closing it again. Once truth is revealed, you cannot return to ignorance. I removed my checkbook from my purse. My hand was steady now. I am ready, I said. I did not understand at that moment how profoundly that single decision would reshape my entire existence. Richard contacted me 4 days later. His voice on the telephone was different from our initial meeting. It carried an urgency and a caution that made my heart accelerate. Eleanor, we need to meet in person. Not over the telephone. My stomach dropped. You found something? I managed to ask. I found something significant, he confirmed. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I drove there within 50 minutes. When I arrived, Richard had prepared his workspace with printed photographs laid out across his desk. Each image bore a date stamp and timestamp. I saw my husband's vehicle parked in various locations. I saw my husband entering dining establishments I had never visited with him. I saw my husband with a woman. She was younger than me, perhaps in her early 60s, with auburn hair and delicate features. In one photograph, they were leaning across a restaurant table, their hands connected. In another, they were entering what appeared to be a hotel together, walking closely, almost intimately. The woman's identity is Sharon Mitchell. Richard explained with a tone of quiet professionalism. She resides in a nearby city, approximately 40 minutes from here. She works as an independent real estate professional, though I've discovered that your husband has steered numerous clients to her over the years. My ability to breathe seemed to diminish. The room felt compressed around me. For how long? I asked, the words emerging as barely more than a whisper. I cannot yet provide a definitive answer, but Eleanor. Richard paused, and in that pause I understood that he had additional information to share, additional complications. There is more that you should know. I conducted a comprehensive background investigation on Miss Mitchell, and what I discovered raises significant questions. According to public records, while she conducts business under the name Sharon Mitchell, her legal name is Sharon Davis. Wait, he continued. Her legal surname on all official documentation is Mitchell, the same surname as your husband. The space around me seemed to tilt. Mitchell, the same last name. It is possible, Richard continued, that this is merely coincidental. Mitchell is a relatively common surname in this region. She could have retained the name from a previous marriage. However, given the photographic evidence I've accumulated, given the frequency of their contact, given everything else I'm observing, I felt you should be informed. I stared at the photographs, at the woman who carried my husband's surname, at the expression on my husband's face as he gazed at her, an expression that mirrored how he used to look at me during our early years together. I want you to continue investigating, I told him. I want comprehensive information. I want to know where she lives, where she conducts her business, how long they have maintained their connection, everything. Eleanor, Richard cautioned, are you certain you want me to proceed? This will escalate expenses significantly. I do not care about the expense, I responded, my voice taking on a firmness I had not anticipated. I need to understand who my husband actually is. Richard nodded slowly. Give me 7 days, he said. The drive home that afternoon felt surreal, as though I was traveling through someone else's life. David was in the family room watching a sporting event when I walked in. Hey there, he said, barely glancing away from the screen. Where have you been? Just out running some errands, I answered, and the lie emerged so naturally that it frightened me. I have a property showing in a neighboring county tomorrow, he said. I'll probably be quite late getting back. Of course, I said numbly. That neighboring county was in the opposite direction from where Sharon lived. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, to the space we had shared as partners for 27 years, and I stood in front of his closet, looking at his clothes, his shoes, his accessories. Everything appeared identical to how it had always been. Yet I was now seeing it all through fundamentally different eyes. Who was this man I had promised my life to? What else had he been concealing? Sleep did not come that night. I lay beside him in the darkness, listening to the rhythm of his breathing, wondering if the woman in those photographs had lain in this very position, wondering how much of my existence had been fabricated. When Richard called 8 days later, his voice had transformed. It carried an intensity and an urgency that made me pull over while driving. "Eleanor, I need you to come to my office right now," he said. "And I think you should bring someone with you. A trusted friend, perhaps, or a family member." "Why? What have you discovered?" "Not over the phone, Eleanor. Please just come." I called Michael immediately. He was occupied with work in a city 2 hours away. But something in the tone of my voice must have communicated genuine distress, because he said he would leave immediately and meet me there. I arrived at Richard's office first. On his desk were 2 substantial folders, each filled with papers that appeared to represent days of investigative work. "Sit down, Eleanor," he said. His eyes were not meeting mine. "Just tell me what you found. Is he involved with someone?" "Eleanor," Richard removed his glasses and pressed his fingers against his eyes. "This is considerably more complicated than a simple affair." The door opened and Michael rushed in, still wearing his business attire, his expression showing alarm. "Mom, what's happening?" Richard waited until Michael had taken a seat beside me. Then he opened the first folder. "Sharon Davis is not your husband's romantic partner," he stated quietly. "She is his wife." The words seemed to arrive from very far away, distorted and unclear. "I am his wife," I said slowly. "You re-suggesting that I am both his wife?" Richard slid a document across the desk toward me. "This is a marriage certificate, Eleanor. It shows David Robert and Sharon and Davis, married on September 8, 1999, registered in the county records office." The signature was unmistakably my husband's. A woman's signature appeared beside it, a date that preceded our meeting by 2 years. "That's impossible," Michael said, his voice shaking. "You were married in 2001. I was at your wedding." "Your mother was married in 2001, Richard said gently. "But your stepfather was already married at that time. He never obtained a divorce from Sharon, which means the marriage that your mother entered into, the marriage that was legally sanctioned, was never actually valid. Eleanor, your husband is a bigamist." The room began to spin. 27 years. Everything I had constructed, everything I had believed to be real, it was all false. "There is additional information," Richard said, opening the second folder. "I performed an exhaustive investigation into property records across multiple jurisdictions. Your husband does not own properties only in this area. He maintains properties registered under Sharon's name in another nearby region. A residence, a very substantial residence valued at approximately $1.4 million. He laid out property deeds, tax documentation, photographs of the exterior and interior of the house. Sharon Davis lives in that residence permanently," Richard explained, pointing to the records. "She has resided there continuously since 1999. Your husband divides his time between both locations. When he tells you he is managing properties or attending client functions, he is actually at her residence. They maintain a life together, Eleanor. A complete life. Their neighbors believe them to be a normal couple engaged in a committed relationship." Michael was crying now. I felt strangely detached, as though I was observing this moment from outside my body. "How is this possible?" I asked. "How could this happen without anyone discovering it?" "The 2 counties maintain separate property record systems," Richard explained. "Unless someone specifically conducted research in both jurisdictions simultaneously, this situation would not have been revealed. And there would be no incentive for anyone to search both counties unless they suspected something unusual. He has been methodical. Very methodical. He maintains completely separate financial accounts for each household. He uses his business accounts strategically to obscure the money trail. If you had not retained my services, you likely never would have discovered this reality." I looked at my son, at the investigator, at the documents distributed across the desk. all of them confirming that my entire adult existence had been constructed on a foundation of lies. What do I do? I whispered. Richard's expression was grave. Monday morning, we contacted an attorney. I did not return home that night. I could not bear to be in that space, in that bed, in that life. Michael drove us to a hotel, and we remained awake until nearly dawn, attempting to process what we had learned. Mom, this is absolutely insane, Michael kept repeating. How did he manage this deception for 27 years? I found myself thinking about his son from his first marriage, about their estrangement. Michael suddenly became very still. What about him, Mom? David's son, I mean. Does he know? I do not know, I replied. They've been distant for many years. David has always said it was because his son could not accept our marriage, could not accept that his father had married again after his mother passed away. When did his first wife die? Michael asked. We looked at each other in the darkness. I had never asked for specific details. David had told me she had died from cancer sometime before we met. We had met in 2000, started a romantic relationship in 2001, and were married that same year. But if he married Sharon in 1999, Michael said slowly, then his first wife did not die. Did she? Or Sharon is his first wife? The room went cold at this realization. Sunday existed in a state of unreality. I could not consume food. Rest was impossible. Every time my eyes closed, I saw that marriage certificate. I saw the photographs of David and Sharon touching. I recalled every anniversary we had celebrated, every declaration of love, every promise. All of it was false. Monday morning arrived with a kind of inevitability. Richard introduced me to his colleague, a lawyer named Patricia Summers. She made a light comment about the similarity of her name to a famous politician, an attempt at levity that fell completely flat. Mrs. Davies, Patricia began, what your husband has committed is not merely ethically wrong. It constitutes a criminal act. The state classifies bigamy as a serious felony. He faces the possibility of significant incarceration. I do not care about incarceration, I said. My voice sounded hollow, disconnected. I care about my life. I care about the years I have given to this person. I care about our home, and the financial resources we accumulated together. Patricia nodded slowly. Here is what I can tell you, she continued. Because your marriage was never legitimate, because he was already committed to another person, you have legal recourse. The state permits claims for emotional damages and fraudulent conduct. Furthermore, if we can demonstrate that he used jointly held financial resources for his illegal activity, we can pursue additional claims. She leaned forward and her expression hardened. In cases involving bigamy, the wronged spouse has the legal right to claim all assets acquired during the fraudulent marriage. Not a portion, all of them. Every property, every account, every asset he accumulated while maintaining this illegal marriage can be considered proceeds of his criminal activity and can be claimed by you. What does this mean specifically? Michael asked. It means everything he owns with your mother, Patricia said. The family home, the commercial real estate holdings, the joint investment accounts, the business interests held jointly, all of it belongs to her now. But beyond that, everything he owns separately, everything he owns with Sharon, if we can demonstrate that he funded those acquisitions through fraudulent means or with jointly held funds, your mother has legitimate claims on those assets as well. The house in the other region, Patricia continued, was purchased decades ago. But the renovations and improvements, the ones completed over the years, were funded through various accounts. If those funds originated from your joint marital accounts, we can argue that the property itself is marital property. She looked directly at me, and her expression was cold, calculated. Everything he owns, Eleanor. That house in the other region, the commercial properties, his portion of the business. It can all be yours. I felt something crystallize inside me then. It was not joy, not exactly. It was something colder, harder, more focused. How do we proceed? Patricia smiled, and it was not a sympathetic expression. We confront him, and we document everything. The strategy was straightforward but terrifying. I would return home and behave as though nothing had changed. I would present myself as the devoted wife. And when David left for work the following morning, Richard would follow him. Patricia would remain with me, and we would access every document, every record, every piece of evidence I could locate. Bank statements, property deeds, business records, financial documents, everything. Tuesday evening was perhaps the most challenging experience of my life. I prepared dinner. We consumed the meal together. David discussed his work, the properties he was managing, the contracts he was negotiating. I smiled and nodded, and the entire experience felt like performing in a theatrical production written by someone else. "You seem withdrawn," he observed. "Is everything all right?" "I'm feeling somewhat fatigued," I lied. "I think I may be developing an illness." "That's difficult," he said, placing his hand on mine. "You should rest. I have an early meeting in a neighboring region tomorrow anyway. A significant commercial transaction. I'll probably not return until late in the evening." Neighboring region. He was not going there. He was going to Sharon. To his actual wife. I excused myself and retired to the bedroom early. I lay in the darkness, listening to him move through the house downstairs, listening to the murmur of his voice as he spoke on the telephone. Was he speaking to her? Planning the day ahead? I remained awake through the entire night. Wednesday morning arrived gray and heavy. David departed at 7 o'clock precisely. By 7:45, Patricia had arrived at my home. "Show me everything," she commanded. We began in his office. His file cabinets were secured with locks, but I knew the location of the key. It was concealed behind a framed photograph, a somewhat cliché hiding place. Inside were years of accumulated documentation. Property ownership records, business contracts, financial statements, loan documents. Patricia photographed everything systematically with her mobile device. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a property deed. This commercial building downtown was purchased in 2003, but the down payment originated from an account registered under Sharon's name. She gathered additional documents. This shopping center in a neighboring town was purchased jointly by David and Sharon in 2005. But examine these renovation invoices. They were paid from our joint checking account. "What does that indicate?" I asked. "It demonstrates fraud," Caroline said. "Clear documented fraud. He was utilizing your money to improve properties he owned with another woman." We spent 4 hours methodically examining every document. The picture that emerged was staggering in its scope. David had constructed a financial empire through deliberate deception. He would use resources from one household to fund activities in the other. He would register properties under Sharon's name, but finance them with funds from our shared accounts. He would claim business expenses that were actually personal expenditures related to his other residents. The property in the other region, Patricia said, reviewing a tax document, was purchased in 1999 for $380,000. It is currently valued at $1.3 million. But these records indicate major renovations in 2009, 2015, and 2020. Patricia showed me bank statements, transfers from our home equity line of credit, withdrawals from our investment accounts, substantial sums totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. "He used your money to construct a palace for his other wife, Eleanor. Every luxury, every improvement, financed by you." My hands were shaking. "How much are we discussing in total?" Patricia performed calculations on her notepad. "Based on conservative estimates, when we account for the properties, the business assets, the financial transfers, we are looking at somewhere between $9 and $13 million. My God, Eleanor, when I said you would become significantly affluent, I was not exaggerating. David is about to lose everything." We scheduled the confrontation for Friday evening. Patricia wanted every element documented, every conversation recorded. I would wear a listening device, something that seemed impossibly theatrical. Yet this was my actual life, my actual betrayal, my actual devastation. David arrived home at 6 o'clock, actually whistling. He kissed my cheek in that familiar gesture he had performed thousands of times before. "Good day?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and controlled. "Excellent day," he responded. "We should close the property deal in the other town. That investment is going to generate substantial returns for us, honey." "Us," he said. As though we were partners. "David, could we talk in the living room?" Something in my tone made him pause. "Is everything all right?" "I have a question," I said, and I need you to answer truthfully. I held the manila folder in my lap. Inside were copies of all the evidence Frank had provided. Is there a woman named Sharon who is connected to your business? He attempted to recover his composure. Sharon? Honey, I have worked with many women named Sharon over the years. I'm referring to Sharon Mitchell, I said. The woman you married. Silence. The kind of silence that is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat echoing in your ears. I do not understand what you re-suggesting. I opened the folder and slid the marriage certificate across the coffee table toward him. His face drained of all color. Where did you obtain that? Answer the question, I said. Is Sharon your wife? David stood up and walked to the window, his back to me. Finally he spoke. Yes, he admitted. Yes, she is my wife. 27 years. 27 years of my life. And he confessed with the casual tone of someone admitting to forgetting a minor obligation. How long has this been occurring? Since 1999. Before me. Before you married me. I felt oddly calm. Perhaps I was experiencing shock. Perhaps I had exhausted my emotional reserves. Did you ever actually love me? I asked. Was any of this genuine? He turned around, and I witnessed something I had never seen in all our years together. Fear. Absolute panic. Eleanor, it is complicated. I love you. I love both of you. You must understand that when Sharon and I married, we were younger. The relationship was deteriorating. However, her father had invested capital into my business ventures. If I had divorced her, he would have withdrawn that investment. I would have lost everything. Instead, you committed bigamy, I said flatly. I was going to resolve this situation eventually, he said. I was going to divorce Sharon. But the business expanded, and circumstances became complicated, and I simply chose to maintain both marriages. You decided to keep both wives. My voice was becoming louder. 27 years, David. 27 years I wore your ring. 27 years I carried your name. I constructed a life with you. You are my wife. No, I stood up. I am not. I never was. Our marriage never possessed legal validity. Every anniversary was constructed on deception. Every expression of love was false. Eleanor, please listen to me. I do not want to listen anymore, I said. Where is Sharon right now? Does she know about me? His expression confirmed my suspicion. She knows, does not she? She has always known. It is not like that, he said weakly. What is it like, David? Explain to me how you have managed to live two completely separate lives for 27 years. He collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. Sometimes I was with Sharon. Sometimes I really was working. Eleanor, you have to believe me. I never intended to hurt you. But you did hurt me. For every single day of 27 years, you hurt me. You stole my existence. You gave me a comfortable life, a beautiful home, financial security using money that was never yours to give. I threw the property records at him. You used our joint funds to pay for her residence. Our money, David. You are a criminal. You stole from me to support your other family. He began to pick up the documents, reviewing them, his face shifting from white to deep red. How did you obtain these? Who gave you these? It is irrelevant how I obtained them, I said. What matters is that I now understand everything. I know about the residence. I know about the properties under her name. I know about every deception, every theft, every dollar you stole from me. He stood up abruptly and I felt genuine fear for the first time. You need to calm yourself, he said, his voice becoming low and threatening. You re-upset. You re-not thinking rationally. I am thinking clearly for the first time in years, I responded. If you proceed with this, if you make this public, if you go to authorities, you will destroy everything, he said. The business, both properties, my reputation, my standing. My reputation? I said incredulously. David, you are a bigamist. You have been committing a felony for 27 years. You have defrauded me out of millions. And you are concerned about your standing? I am thinking about you, he shouted. If this becomes public knowledge, if this becomes common information, you will be humiliated. Everyone will know. Your friends, your family, Michael. Michael already knows. My attorney knows. The investigator knows. And very soon, everyone else will know as well. His face became ashen. Attorney? Investigator? I demonstrated, checking the time on my mobile telephone. She should be serving Sharon with legal documents right now. What have you done? What did you do? My lawyer should be filing charges against you as we speak, I said. I protected myself. That is what I should have done from the beginning. I protected my interests. David lunged for me, grabbing my arm firmly. You cannot do this, Caroline. Please. We can work this out. We can resolve this quietly. I will divorce Sharon. I will make this right. Release me, I said. We can fix this. Just do not go to the authorities. Please. I am imploring you. Release me immediately, or I am contacting emergency services. He released my arm as though I had burned him. It is finished, David. The lies, the dual existence, all of it. It is over. You are making a tremendous error, he said, his voice becoming almost hollow. No, I said quietly. I made my error 27 years ago when I pledged my commitment to a man who was already legally married. I am correcting that error now. The legal process moved with surprising speed. David was arrested on criminal charges the following Monday. Jennifer informed me that when police arrived at his office, his expression finally reflected who he actually was, a man whose fabrications had finally accumulated beyond his ability to manage them. Sharon attempted to contact me repeatedly, calling my telephone number 14 times in a single day, leaving voicemails in which she wept and insisted she had been unaware of my existence, that David had told her I was informed and accepting of her presence, that we had some understanding. Patricia instructed me not to respond. Every matter would be addressed through legal representation. The discovery phase was exhausting and comprehensive. Every financial transaction, every bank statement, every deception was documented and presented as evidence. The prosecutors assembled their case with clinical precision. David had utilized business accounts to finance both households. He had engaged in wire fraud, filing fraud, falsification of documents. The bigamy charge was merely the foundation upon which multiple other criminal charges rested. Patricia filed civil actions on my behalf alleging fraud, emotional damages, misappropriation of funds. The financial totals continued escalating. The family home is valued at $2 million, Patricia explained during one of numerous meetings. It is completely debt-free. Because your marriage was never valid, you possess the exclusive right to claim complete ownership. The business assets are considerably more complicated to disentangle, but we are estimating your share at approximately $5 million. Then we have the property where Sharon resides. Because David utilized funds from your joint accounts for the down payment, and for extensive renovations over the years, you possess a legitimate claim to that property as well. Sharon is contesting it, but the documentation is irrefutable. What about Sharon? I inquired. Does she receive anything? Patricia's expression became sharp and cold. Sharon was complicit in the fraud. She possessed knowledge of your existence. She was aware that David was committing bigamy. She benefited financially from resources that were stolen from you. She should consider herself fortunate if she departs with the clothes she is wearing. The trial continued for several weeks. I was required to provide testimony. I sat in that courtroom and articulated our story, my story, for an audience of strangers. I was forced to examine my husband while his lawyer whispered suggestions. I recalled all the years I had cared for him and I recognized him for what he truly was. A criminal. His defense rested on claims that he had intended to divorce Sharon eventually. His position was that life had simply become complicated, that he cared for both of us, that he had provided adequately for both households and nobody had experienced financial hardship. The prosecutor systematically dismantled his defense. Mr. Mitchell, is it accurate that you utilized funds from Mrs. Davies' accounts from joint accounts that she contributed to purchase real estate that you registered under Ms. Davis's name? It was not like that, he responded. Please answer yes or no, Mr. Mitchell. Yes. And is it accurate that you claim tax deductions for home office expenses at the residence where Ms. Davis lives, which you designated to the IRS as your primary residence while simultaneously listing this property as your primary residence on other tax documentation? I can explain. Please explain how it is feasible to maintain two primary residences simultaneously. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Bigamy, fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion. The judge sentenced him to 7 years in federal prison. Asset forfeiture was mandated. Restitution was required. And then came the civil judgment. Patricia stood in my living room that now possessed legitimate title in my name alone, holding the final settlement documentation. Eleanor, you need to be seated for this, she said. The total amount reached $1 million. The Asheville property, the property where Sharon resided, 3 commercial properties, David's stake in the business venture, investment accounts, retirement savings, everything. Sharon received nothing. The court determined she had participated in the fraud. I eventually located David's son, the one he had claimed to be estranged from for years. It transpired he had understood the truth about both marriages and wanted no involvement with either of us. Michael remained with me throughout those initial months. The shock, the grief, the strange sensation of being simultaneously devastated and prosperous, and utterly deceived all seemed to occur simultaneously. Mom, Michael asked one evening as we sat together on my deck overlooking the mountains, what will you do now? I gazed out at the landscape I had loved for 27 years without truly perceiving it. I will live, I said simply. I will genuinely live. And I have. I eventually sold the property in the other region. I could not bear maintaining any connection to Sharon or to that place. I contributed a portion of the settlement to organizations supporting women who have experienced fraud in relationships. I established a trust for Michael and his children. The investigator's fee of $3,500 represented the most valuable financial investment I ever made. Richard Delgado demonstrated to me that trusting my internal voice was not paranoia. It was survival. David is currently incarcerated in a minimum security facility, though still a prison nonetheless. He will become eligible for parole after serving a portion of his sentence. He has written me letters. I have incinerated every single one without reading them. Sharon relocated to another state, or so I have heard. The court nullified our marriage retroactively, which created a complicated legal situation for Sharon, as she technically remained married to David while he was imprisoned. She filed for divorce 6 months after his sentencing. I cannot fault her decision. At 72 years old, I am finally inhabiting the life I should have been living all along. I travel extensively. I spend quality time with my grandchildren. I wake up each morning in a home that is completely and irrevocably mine, with no deceptions, no concealment, no one pillaging my resources while I slept beside them. People frequently ask whether I harbor bitterness, whether I feel anger, whether I hate him. The answer is considerably more nuanced than a straightforward response. I grieve the decades I sacrificed. I experience anger about the betrayal. However, I have made a deliberate choice not to permit bitterness to take root. To embrace bitterness would mean permitting David to continue stealing from my life. I have determined he has extracted quite enough. What he was incapable of stealing was my resilience, my capacity to trust my instincts, my determination to pursue truth regardless of the consequences. To every woman who is still listening to this account, and I genuinely hope you are present with me, I need to communicate something important. If your internal voice is communicating that something is incorrect, that sensation is likely accurate. You are not experiencing delusion. You are not being irrational. You are not overreacting. You are demonstrating wisdom. Trust your perception. Ask difficult questions. Demand authenticity. Because regardless of whether you are 60, 70, 80, or any other age, you are deserving of genuine connection. You are deserving of honesty. You are deserving of authentic love, not theatrical performance. My name is Eleanor Davies, though I am in the process of reverting to my original surname, Eleanor Richardson. This is my account of what occurred. And if sharing this story helps even a single individual trust their internal voice and reclaim their truth, then every painful moment possessed purpose.